Yeah, while waiting to talk, I've been reflecting on how curious it is that the body has the same kind of response, whether you are on an interview, you are about to give a conference, or you are being chased by a tiger. I guess we didn't evolve to give conferences, we evolved or we survive running away from tigers and other dangers. I am not an expert on human evolution, but I know a thing or two about evolving code. And this is what my talk is about, how to deal with complexity in the code in a Laravel application. But first, a little bit about me. I have been working with PHP for the past 16 years. I've been working with Laravel from the past 10 years. I started a project with Laravel 3. Has anybody here used Laravel 3 or Laravel 4 for about? All right. At that time, PHP had a really, really bad reputation, and I was standing alone in the Spanish community writing tutorials saying, hey, we can write cool applications with this new framework called Laravel. We can use dependency injection and other good practices. And people started to listen at some point. I have also made a few open source contributions. One of them that I am very proud of is a component called Enlighten for Laravel that I created with my colleague and friend Jeff Ochoa. If you have written, for example, an API in Laravel and you have taken the time to write tests, hopefully, you can install Enlighten, and Enlighten will run the test for you, and it will gather all the information from the requests and the responses, and it will generate a documentation that you can then export as a static website. So if you have an API with tests, you don't have time to write a documentation, I recommend you to have a look at Enlighten. About 6 months ago, I also started working in a company called LendInvest. LendInvest is a fintech company based in London. They have lent more than £4 billion in the property sector, working with banks, institutions, property professionals. They are a listed company in the London Stock Exchange, and their main backend language is, guess what? Good old PHP. And this actually surprised me, and I have been working with PHP for 16 years. I guess at some point I started buying into that narrative that PHP is dead, or yeah, it's not dead, but then it's only WordPress, and you cannot really create an infrastructure of billions of pounds with PHP. And both in LendInvest and other companies I have worked for or interviewed with, they use PHP and they have projects worth millions or billions of pounds. So I'm really proud to be a PHP developer, and I hope that if you had that slide out in the back of your head, that PHP is not that great, I hope you don't think about that way anymore. And this is possible because good development practices are universal. I have books about refactoring, design pattern, and many other topics, DDD, for example. And they are written in Java or JavaScript or Ruby on Rails, but the practices there can be applied to PHP, practices like TDD, solid principles, design patterns, architecture, or even domain-driven development. They can be applied to PHP because PHP supports OOP, and by extension, languages and frameworks like Symfony or Laravel as well. So without much further ado, let's have a look at the example that I have prepared today. I need to maximize this, so give me a second. Yeah. So basically, I have taken this example from what I do at LendInvest. Why? Because I wanted to show you a real-like example, but it's a simplified one, because mortgages are very complex, so it's a very simplified example, but it looks like something I would actually work with at LendInvest. So let's say that we are trying to buy a property, and the property has a cost of £100,000. We happen to have 25K lying around in our bank account. So we are trying to find a product that will allow us to get a mortgage. We require a loan amount of $75,000, and this will give us a loan-to-value ratio or LTV ratio of 75%, which is a simple rule of 3 between the loan amount and the property value. I don't know if you knew this, probably not, but when you are looking for a mortgage and you say how much you earn, etc., all of that will apply some filters, and those filters will bring some products that will be available to you. And the mortgage advisor will recommend one of those products. So this is what we are doing here, right? We get that LTV of 75%, and this will give us products that have an LTV ratio or 75 or more. So 75 or 80, for example. So we are querying these products. Each product has attributes: the max LTV, the fee, the interest rate. And with those attributes combined with the attributes from the calculation result, we are going to generate a quote for each product to basically tell us how much is the fee going to be, how much are we going to pay for interest, and if this was a real mortgage application, we will have dozens of more variables and data. We also have some feature products here because I like to complicate my life, I don't know. So basically, it's a very simplified example, but we have a form, we have a global calculation result, we have a query of products, and we have the generation of a quote for each product, and the feature products, as I mentioned. And everything happens to be in just one big Livewire component in the render method, because why not? So here, can you see the code? Is fine or too small? OK, thank you. So here we are basically making the decision. Do we want to search products or not? To search products, we need these variables. If we are searching for products, we need to perform the calculation of the net loan and an LTV. Simple formulas. If this was real, there would be 10 or more formulas, so you can imagine this. Then we have a query for the products with the max LTV is greater or equal than the LTV from the search, as I mentioned, and then we need to build each product quote. And here I am being kind of hacky. I am just adding data to Eloquent attributes, abusing that dynamism of Eloquent. If we don't have a search, we have some null values. Then we have the feature products, as I mentioned. Eventually, we pass the data to the view. And as you can imagine, I didn't care about the render method, so I also have everything in just one view. The form, the calculation, the feature products, the calculation, the product quotes, everything is in just one big view. This is a problem. If this was all there was to it, or we need to present a demo, that's fine. But if we were writing this for a real application, this is going to become a problem. Why? For example, we have talked about tests in the conference. One of the main things that I would be concerned about is this work? I don't want to give an incorrect quote to my clients. So I need to write tests. The first one is fairly easy. We request a homepage, test that it loads correctly, and then that we can see the Livewire component product search. Then to show the feature products, we create two products. One is feature, one isn't. And then we want to test that we can see the feature product, and we cannot see the one that is no feature. To calculate the LTV and the loan amount, this starts to get a little bit more complicated because for some reason, even though it's simple math, we need to go through Livewire, set some properties in the Livewire component, and then assert that we can see some text. Here I could have used a ServView has. I could have done that. But this is still not ideal. We shouldn't need Livewire to test simple math. Nothing against Livewire, really, but we shouldn't require to put a Livewire component to test a simple math calculation, in my opinion. And if we want to test that we can see products, for example, with an LTV of 80 or more, we are a little bit in trouble here because we need to create products in the database, one with 80, another one 79, another one 81, and we need to boot the Livewire component again, set the properties. And then finally, we can assert that we see some products, and then we don't see the one that has 79. But remember that in that view, we also have feature products. So even though if that view is passing at the moment, if I commented this line here, I'm going to be creating what is called a flaky test. OK. After a few attempts, it fails. Why? Because even though the feature is built correctly, this product with 79% is being displayed in the list of featured products. So if we had several views with different product lists, we wouldn't run into this kind of trouble. So I'm going to be coding live on stage refactoring. No, not really. I prepared this code beforehand, so let's move to the first refactoring, where we are going to do something very simple. We are going to move those featured products away to their own component. So after jumping to the new branch, we will see we have a simple Blade component called featured products. It performs the query to get the featured products. And if you are, you might not like this. You might say, well, you should use a repository pattern rather than mixing a Blade component. It's fine, really. This fix on the screen is very easy to understand. We are just querying some featured products in random order, and we are passing them to the view. If we come here, we see that we have a very simple template. However, at the moment, we still have everything in the same Livewire component. Because if we go here back to the view, we will see that I am only including the Blade component in the Livewire component. I have improved the code, but everything is still in the same view, and I will have the same problem with the test. In the next step, however, I need to force this change. And in the next step, we have now separated the Livewire component in two components. We have the form, and this form is very simple. It's a form in HTML without any reference to Livewire, except at the very bottom we have a script. And this script will basically emit an event, a Livewire event, called search products, every time the form is submitted. This Livewire event will be emitted with these values from the property value and the deposit amount, and this event will be listened to by the search results component. Every time this event is emitted, it will be listened to here. We will update these properties, and then this will force a re-render of the Livewire component once again. All right? We should still have the test passing. We should still have this little app working, I hope. Cannot use the skills that work in my computer because this is my computer. So it's working. And we now have tests, individual tests, for the featured products component, for the form component. It's very simple, but has its own test, and for the search results. And here in the search results, we no longer need to worry about whether these products are created as featured or not. Why? Because we have one individual view for the available products that we can see here. This view has been not really simplified, but it now contains only the available products list. So there is not going to be any conflict there. However, we still have lots of calculations being performed in this Livewire component that, in my opinion, shouldn't be there. We should be able to test these calculations outside of Livewire. So let's move to the next step to have a look at how that could look like. In this next step, I have created a folder called Services. This folder has a simple class called Calculate LTV. This class takes the property value, the deposit amount, it calculates the net loan, LTV, and those and other values. And it returns what we call a DTO, or a data transfer object. This is a very fancy name to basically say a simple PHP object that is used to group data, and that can be passed through different layers. For example, from the service to a Livewire component, a console command, a controller, etc. Here we have the data, the original entry data from the user, and we also have the calculation results. And because I have extracted these services to its own class, I can test it individually. I have a unit test here. And this test can basically take some data, and it can perform the calculation and assert that we get the expected calculation. And this test, it doesn't have any reference to Livewire, to Eloquent, to any framework. If Laravel is updated to, I don't know, version 15, we don't have to worry about this test or the service. However, we still have, if we go back to our Livewire component, you can see that I have kept the variables, the local variables that I had before. This is because I like to perform this refactoring in a granular way. In this moment, I am just importing this service through the boot method. If you have worked with Livewire before, or if you haven't, you can use these methods, and they will be called through the Laravel container to basically inject objects. A service, in this case, fancy name for just an object, a plain object that, in this case, perform a calculation. We will receive that object. We will have it available as a property, a private one, because we don't need to pass it to the view, and it will be available in our component. But we still have these local variables. Let's remove them in the next step. Okay, in this next step, we see that the local variables are gone. We are using a principle of object-oriented programming that says that things that go together should be together. In this case, the calculation is just one calculation. It has two or more variables, but it's just one calculation. It's grouped in the DTO, and now we use the DTO everywhere in our component to perform the calculations, including in our view. If we go really quickly to our view, you will see that I am now using the DTO in the view as well. We still have a few more steps that we can do to simplify this Livewire component. We can, for example, extract the logic to perform the query for the products and to create each product quote. If we go to the next step, I have created another service called getProductQuotes. As the name implies, I am getting the product quotes. I have the query, and for each product, I am basically building the quote. This has a test as well. Basically, what I'm doing here in this refactoring, every time that I extract something, I take the opportunity to write a unit test for that. This test is a little bit, it's not as simple as I would like it to be, because we still need to deal with the database to create these products with different LTVs, 75, 73, 76, 74, and we need to check that, for example, if we pass a calculation with the LTV 75, we only get two products in our quotes, the one that has LTV 76 and the one that has LTV 75. And I am also testing the quotes. There is still a lot going on here, but at least we are making progress. We can start testing our code without Livewire, and we could use this getProductQuotes service, for example, for an API or for a command. Imagine we are now building a mobile application. We can use this service injected in a controller, and then we have all these calculations available somewhere else in our system. Or if our business analyst says, well, we need to, I actually receive a message, we need to change one of the formulas. Okay, I can come here to this class, and I can do that work without having to worry about Laravel, Livewire, the user interface, or anything like that. We can go a little bit further, of course, and again, we shouldn't need the database to test these calculations, especially if we have more than 3 calculations. So in our next step, I have created another service called createProductQuote. This service takes a product, the LTV calculation, it performs these calculations, and it returns, you should guess it by now, another DTO that is called product quote. That DTO will have or wrap the product, and it will have the results from the calculation. Again, this create product quote, if you have a look at it, it doesn't have any reference to Livewire or the database. We are still injecting or passing an eloquent model. But I will show you a trick to actually remove that as well. I have a unit test as well. This code will be available on GitHub. So if I am going a little bit fast, you can, and you like the refactoring, you can have a look at in your own time. But this test basically, tests how we can create a product quote. We instantiate the service, we pass the given data, and then we assert that we generate the right quote. I am using here something called data providers in PHP unit. You can also use them in PEST, as you learned today. And basically here I am iterating through different permutations. And this is useful because you want to know, how are we going to deal with decimals? Are we going to round to 2 decimals, 4 decimals? What about precision? Do we want to work with floats or something else? This is a complex problem, and it's good to be able to deal with this problem in a unit way without having to worry about Livewire, Eloquent, the database, etc. So we have different permutations here, and if this was a real test, a real example, I would add more than 2 permutations, probably, I don't know, 5 or something, 10 or something like that. All right? We can have a look at or get product quotes. And now it takes as a dependency the service to create the product quote, and we are using that service here. So basically with this, we achieve another good object-oriented programming practice. Basically object composition. We compose a service of other services. We then use the composition of objects in our Livewire component or in our controller, and then we are achieving this nice design. Everything is unit tested. If, for example, the Livewire component fails, we can see, well, is our unit test passing? If it isn't, then the problem is there. If it is, maybe the problem is in the Livewire component. All right, I am still hacking into this product model, and I wouldn't like to do that. So let's move to the next step. And here, let's pay attention to this. We are going through each product to basically assign these values. But rather than returning a collection of products with some extra attributes, we are going to return a collection of product quotes. And this makes sense because our class is called getProductQuotes, and that's what we are expecting to get. So we perform the query, and then we map. When we map, we transform the product to another object or another value, in this case, a product quote. So again, this is going to return a collection of product quotes, and we can use that collection of product quotes in our Livewire component. I have renamed the variable. Please don't forget to do this if you are changing types. I have renamed from product to product quotes, and I am passing those product quotes to the view. Here I am doing the loop, and to get the data from the product, I now need to get to the product, so quote product name, and to get the data in the quote, I can do it directly, quote fee amount, gross loan amount, etc. All right, we are almost at the end here. However, we still have that reference to product, to the Eloquent model. And people here will criticize Active Record and will say, if you are using Active Record, I have to hear this throughout my career, so it's kind of venting a little bit. They will say, if you are using Active Record, there is no way that you can achieve domain-driven design because all of your domain logic will be tied to the model, etc. That's not true, and I'm going to show you what you can do in this case. And this is a technique that is being used by the Laravel team as well, in the framework, in the code itself, and in other components like Laravel Nova, etc. If we move to the step 8, I have replaced the reference to the Eloquent model for a reference to an interface that I'm calling quotable product. A product can be quoted if it has a fee and an interest rate. And if this was a real example, probably 10 other variables or 20 other variables. Here I am using the dependency inversion principle of Solid. In order to make this work, we need to go to the product model, and we need to make sure this product model implements the interface and it complies with that contract, basically having these two getters. After we do that, then we can pass our products to or create product quote. All right? And we are almost at the end. If we go back to our Livewire component, we will see that essentially all the logic has, or most of it has disappeared. We still have this if-else that I find a little bit annoying. So this is a personal reference of mine. I did one more step to basically remove the if-else. How can I achieve that? Using what we call guard clauses. Here we have a method called calculate LTV, and we check, do we have a property value and a deposit amount? If not, then we cannot do anything. Here we return null or a null LTV calculation object if we were using the null pattern. Otherwise, we use the service to perform the calculation. And to get the product quotes, we do the same. We pass the LTV calculation to this getProductQuotes method. And here we basically ask, do we have an LTV calculation? If not, we return an empty collection. Otherwise, we get the product quotes. So you can see that the render method has changed a lot. And now we have a Livewire component that is very clean. We get all this power from Livewire without compromising the quality of our code. And basically, I am running out of time, but I wanted to mention a couple of things. We basically refactor to tackle the complexity of our application. For example, in the case of our feature products component, I don't care that we have Eloquent here. This is a very simple component. If you understand Eloquent, it's very simple. I don't think we need to go beyond that. We don't need a repository pattern. Same here in the get product quotes. Do we need a repository pattern to extract this code? I don't think so. If this was way more complex, yes, I would probably do that. But in this concrete example, I don't think so. So we do refactoring not because of sport, because we like it. We do it when we need to tackle complexity in our code. However, we need to make sure that every time we refactor, our application continues to work. Refactoring is not changing behavior, and it's not breaking the application. If you are breaking the application, you are not refactoring. You are breaking your application, and you might be fired because of that. Also, we need to use these solid principles. This one I took, by the way, from a Laracon talk in 2018. We need to use these solid principles as guides and tools, not as goals, end goals, or religion. Our goal is to basically use these solid principles to take advantage and develop a better application for the benefit of our stakeholders and end users. We are not coding to try to please Uncle Bob or any other author. We are using the knowledge to our advantage, not against us. All right? If you enjoyed this talk, this code is going to be available quite soon in GitHub. You can also follow me on Twitter. I am trying to create more content in English. And also, if you are interested in new career opportunities, please visit learningbest.com/career or talk to me at the end of the conference. Thank you very much.
Wait.
Sorry.
I got a question, man.
No.
I got a question. Don't worry. I got a question.
Yeah.
From an anonymous user.
Uh-oh.
When, in which case, the solid principle really was helpful?
Really was awful.
Helpful.
Helpful. Yeah. Well, basically, I didn't have a time to explain all the solid principles one by one, but what I applied, most of it was a single responsibility principle. There is a part where, I don't know if I can still show to answer.
I think we have time.
A controversial answer to what the single responsibility is. Basically, they say that a class should have one responsibility. Can I have the thing? They say that a class could have one responsibility. And in the case of, for example, these feature product components, it has two. It queries, and it passes the data to the view, and it shows the view. So technically, here I am breaking the single responsibility principle. However, if you have read, or if you read Clean Architecture by Uncle Bob, after 300 pages or so, he will say that a class should be, one actor should be responsible of one class or one part of the code. An actor means a department. So basically, if you are working in a fintech company, you have business analysts and you have designers. Who is going to request changes to this class? These changes will come by the people, by the department who cares about the user interface, so maybe designers, front-end developers. They will tell, by the way, can you show the feature products, the most recent first, or can you show 10 rather than 5? I don't know. But for example, the message I received today that we need to perform some changes in some calculations because, of course, that change will come by the business analysts and the stakeholders. So they will basically make decisions that will influence this class or this class. Right, so basically, if you want to comply with the single responsibility principle, you need to try to make sure that only one department in your company can ask you for changes in one class. If you are working with a client that has a very small store to sell socks or something like that, and it's only one client, and you have one contact controller, there is only one client, one person who can ask you for changes in that contact controller. I don't think you need to split it in 10 different classes. Repository, form request, whatever. But I don't know, that's the heuristic I use nowadays, and that's been helpful because it lets me think about it. Who could request changes to this class? And in this case, it's just one department, the business analyst, etc.
Thank you. So once again, a big applause for Duilios.
All right.